This is the Roxanne Show. Get ready. It's time to rise. I'd love to hear you speak on self-love. I'm curious to what is self-love to you, and how does it show up in your life, and how does it challenge you?
Well, I'd say that self-love to me is a set of habits and rituals that are aligned with values. So it's your choices. And if you love your choices, you'll love yourself. If you don't love your choices, you won't. And, you were talking about how like there is an element of incongruence that leads to the recognition of congruence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a necessary part is to recognize that a choice isn't serving. But, how it shows up for me is like, wait, what is a combination of choices that would be liberating for me, that are actually serving me, that are actually feeding me? There's this idea that a lot of our motivations actually come initially from dark places. That it's like, I want to be enough. I'm a perfectionist. I want to hustle for worth. I'm angry at the world. And that's great. But eventually it has to, and usually dark coping mechanisms are things like alcohol, drugs, sex, right? Like insert whatever. And eventually it has to switch to being a light motivation, which actually comes from a place of love for what we've created, love for who we are. And those coping mechanisms are different. There are things like nature, bathing in nature. There are things like having a boundary. There are things like meditation or breath work or cold plunging or whatever your habit is.
Yeah.
That says like, this vessel I'm in matters. My heart matters. And I think it's also probably no, it's for sure, not probably, the changing of how you eat, how you nourish yourself. And you think of nourishment. I love the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. They talk about how like nourishment is everything in your life, not just food. It's like, is this relationship nourishing? Is my behavior nourishing? And I think when we can get really clear on whether it is or is not, then the next question is like, okay, I got to get rid of it. Like, what would getting it into alignment look like?
Yeah.
And I think that's an ever evolving thing. I think that you're never 100% in integrity because you're always learning more things. And I don't know how long we can actually tolerate the awareness that we're out of integrity. I'd say it's not that long.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I'm sure everybody's tolerance is different, but I agree with you. And I'm so, regarding the nourishment, I love that you brought that in, because you want, it's like what's giving to you, what's helping you flourish versus what's like an energy leak, what's, taking from your essence, from your vitality. Vitality is huge for me. You want to hear your intuition and feel it better. Well, the more vitality you're operating with, the better able you're, to do that. Better able you are to do that. There's a through line that is very obvious with you and so appreciated with you. And it's this honesty piece, this self-honesty piece. And I think self-love and self-honesty, and it's not easy, right? Like to be honest with yourself. I mean, even when you're talking about the ceremony, you're like, fuck, it was number 2. That's the honest answer. But it's that, again, it's that willingness to be so honest with yourself. And that is a form of loving yourself, even if that honesty is like punching you in the fucking face, metaphorically, right?
Yeah, truth.
Would you say?
And I think the first truths you come to, or you come right with, or get right with, they're usually the punch to the face. But eventually you have no tolerance for your own deception, because ultimately not owning the truth is your own deception. It's not anyone else's. We like to put it on other people. It's like I often see, like in my own experience, the betrayals I've experienced in my life were always preceded by my own betrayals of myself. It just ended up like my no that I never engaged in led me to a moment in my life that was a clear no, that I was actually being betrayed on the other end, because you only end up in those moments when you betray yourself. And I think it's easy to fall into the martyr, especially with great betrayals, which I did. I lived in the martyr for a long time. But it's actually so liberating to say, oh, there's actually a choice that preceded that's on me. And, like you can't change what happened in your life. That's just reality, unless you can learn how to time travel, which is great.
Yeah.
But I can't.
Yeah.
And so since the agreement that you and I have about time is we can't go back, we can actually go backwards in terms of what we make things mean. And that can completely dissolve sticky moments of our past. And I think the way where people get stuck, especially in the conversation on social media, because you're kind of oscillating with the lowest consciousness. Not that we are oscillating with the lowest consciousness, but you're in conversation with people who are not actually interested in exploring life in the same way. And that's okay. That adds diversity. It's not hierarchical. It just is. But what's interesting is often the response to everything in our life happens for us is, okay, so I guess like child trafficking and rape and murder and war and all these things, you're saying they're happening for us. Absolutely not. We're not saying being a victim is something you create. Right. It's the word victim. You are a victim of someone else's behavior. No one wants to negate the actual pain and suffering that comes from that. At least I don't.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can we be with the truth that we experience victimization? And what do we do with it?
Yeah.
If we go from, I was a victim, okay, but I don't want to live there. That's it. It's like, if it is happening for me, if I can just adopt that lens, then I can at least garner the lesson in it. And, usually when you look at things from childhood, the lesson is usually that it wasn't safe for us to embody a no.
100%.
Wasn't safe.
Yeah.
So you don't want to shame the 5-year-old or the 8-year-old in you or the ones
Yeah.
is to say, how do I access that fucking no now?
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't let me grow? You wouldn't let me choose my passions? Fuck you.
Right.
Like, how do I do that now?
Yes.
You wouldn't let me have boundaries? You bulldoze my shit?
Yeah.
How do I get so boundaried up now that love flows through it, And so it's like being able to be in the both and that's an art, being in the both and, especially if we source power from martyrdom. If you source power from being a victim, which is different than, being an actual victim versus living a victim mentality, which I'm always there's so much small print to all that because I don't want people to experience the minimization of what's happened in their life.
Truly right there with you. Again, not things that I talk about so much in my show, but also not like hiding it. My siblings and I and my mother, for a good period of my youngest childhood, hardcore domestic violence. Father beat our ass, right? And you're just getting to know me, right? So you don't know too much about, but I'm sure, and you're also very...
I like it.
Most people who take in any of what I share would not necessarily ever put that together, because usually, and I'm not putting anybody down, but usually these kind of circumstances create a different mindset. Whereas like and I don't even know how the fuck I did this. Like, how did I not become a victim of it?
Right.
And how did I instead, there is something, in psychology, post-traumatic growth, we could maybe say that, right? But nothing was even conscious in that way for me and my siblings. All of us is like, nothing in my life that is hard that I've been through or that I continue to go through has ever taken me from me. If anything, I've I've ran into myself and gone deeper into myself, but I'm fully with you. And I can speak as someone who has, lived really traumatic experiences from my childhood, that there is a difference of becoming a victim of, and having that victim mindset, and then and having that, take away your agency and, and then let that be the rest of your life, versus, okay, this happened to me. How do I and it's not like it has to be an immediate thought and action, but how can I leverage this experience to become a higher expression of me or create a life that is outstanding from this? Like for me, it's I leverage my hardships. I look back and I'm like, well, shit, if we handled that, like, come on, life. Thanks so much for listening, you guys. Please like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and review.